This is episode 2. It is February 27th, 2020, and this week we are going to be discussing lots of things, mostly in detail the first half of the Pelicans season. We are shortly after the All-Star break, so I want to talk a little bit of Pelicans basketball. In addition to that, maybe the emergence of Pelican star Zion Williamson and how he has stacked up in the NBA so far. I'm going to get into the proposed NFL CBA, some of the effects it would have on the league. And then we're going to discuss some of the impending NFL Combine that's taking place this week, some of the players participating in that from Louisiana schools. And then we're going to take some questions. I got a couple questions that have been submitted by listeners. We're going to discuss some of that stuff. This is the American Sports Podcast and is brought to you by some very new sponsors. The American Sports Podcast is brought to you by Sola Safety Services. If you own or manage a business, your employees are a very valuable asset. Employees are the first line of defense in the field and share the responsibility for quality, health, and safety. Your employees need to be trained to identify risks and to manage them while on the job. With over 60 years of combined safety services and management experience in the oil and gas and construction industries, Sola Safety Services can help you create and manage a strong program specific to your company and your needs. Call Sola Safety Services today to build a better culture for your company. 337-210-3352. That's 337-210-3352. So let's jump right into some Pelicans talk. Let's discuss the first half of the Pelicans season. We're going to discuss some other things in regards to how we got to this point. But I want to start off by just taking a look at it from a broad angle, right? So currently, just over halfway through the NBA season, the Pelicans sit at 25 wins and 33 losses. 25 and 33. That's fourth in Southwest Division, a half a game behind the Portland Trail Blazers for the 9th seed in the West, and 3.5 games behind the 8th seeded Memphis Grizzlies for a playoff seed. So what does that tell me? It tells me first and foremost that the West is mostly weak in a lot of regard. You have to jump up to the 6th seed Indiana Pacers to find a team above 500. The old philosophy of you are what your record says you are, I don't really completely think that applies with the Pelicans at 25. I think that the Pelicans fan base and most of the NBA community around the world has waited in much anticipation for the return of the draft number 1 pick, Zion Williamson, for the first 3 months of the season. And we're going to get to Zion a little bit more here in a bit, but I, for one, do not think the current under 500 season that the Pelicans are in has gone all wrong like many or some believe. I think, despite the two biggest factors, the team is definitely headed in the right direction. And you can see it from the product that they put on the floor each night. The two main factors, in my opinion, that have hindered the Pelicans so far is the absence, obviously, of their superstar Zion Williamson and injuries. So, the Pelicans are top 5 in the NBA in terms of games missed due to injuries. They're hovering right around 160 games. Obviously, a large portion of those can be attributed to the loss of Zion Williamson. And injuries affect teams in all sports. It's always great to have that next man up mentality. But I think one of the biggest negatives of injuries, besides the absence of a player's production, especially someone to the caliber of Zion Williamson, can be that the missed opportunity to grow as a team and form some chemistry on the court. You can only practice so much and create a game-like environment to get players and coaches to gel with one another. It's also a morale thing for a locker room. Winning is good for morale, but playing together and having rhythm and chemistry is one of the backbones of morale as well. These are all elements that go into building a winning program in any sport. What I'm getting at is that I saw, even with those two biggest factors of missing Zion and injuries, I saw this team gel. You had a new look roster in 2020 with some additions from the trade for the Lakers, some free agent acquisitions, and some additions to the draft. You had a new look front office. The franchise underwent somewhat of a facelift and is just now, very early in the process, starting to reap some of those benefits. Maybe on a smaller scale, but you can see it. With a little bit of luck and some proper organizational management, the Pelicans have gotten most of the decisions to change the culture and the future of the club correct, in my opinion. So let's take a look at those things first. I want to go all the way back to 2010. And this is what I was saying is I want to take a look at it to how we got to this point. Okay? And without going into too much detail, I want to go back to 2010. With the hiring of former team general manager Dell Demps. To me, Demps took on a hell of a challenge. He took on a challenge when he accepted the GM job in New Orleans. The team was then owned by the league after buying it from the New Orleans businessman George Shinn. After a 3-6 start, 9 games into the 2009-2010 season, general manager Jeff Bowers fired head coach Byron Scott and then himself took over the head coaching duties. The GM leaves the corporate office to become the team's head coach / GM. Complete dumpster fire. There were talks about the team's poor financial state and the poor financial state of its then owner as well. So the league buys the team. They hire Dell Demps as GM and Monty Williams as head coach, and the team wins 46 games and makes the playoffs in its first season with its new regime. The future looked very bright, with a superstar point guard in Chris Paul as the face of the franchise. Then, a large speed bump presents itself. Prior to the 2011-2012 season, the Hornets began fielding trade offers for Chris Paul. A little bit of push on Chris Paul's part, he was ready to move on from New Orleans. Look, New Orleans isn't a big market. If you're not winning and you're not competing for championships, it's always going to be hard to keep superstar players. It's going to be hard to attract big-name free agents or productive free agents when there are no superstar players. Surprisingly and very luckily, the franchise has had some luck with the draft to get those types of players. First, a 4th overall pick in 2005 with Chris Paul, a number 1 overall pick in 2012 with Anthony Davis, and then obviously the number 1 pick in 2019 was Zion Williamson. These picks and hugely popular players bring attention and money to the team and the city and community. In my opinion, without getting Anthony Davis in 2012 and the subsequent purchase of the team in 2012 by Tom Benson, the organization is probably no longer in New Orleans. Tom Benson and Anthony Davis had a huge role in saving New Orleans basketball. So many people criticize Dell Demps' attempts and the eventual trade of Chris Paul in 2011. But I'm a firm believer that he was just a middleman. He was a middleman and all that. I think David Stern and the league, who's still on the team at the time, were still pulling the puppet strings in order to manipulate that trademark and to manipulate the transaction to keep the team and the league's best interests. Now, don't get me wrong. All owners do this. But when the league owns the team, it's somewhat of a conflict of interest. And most likely, it doesn't leave the GM with much wiggle room. To me, that trade set the team back. And again, it's why I think without Anthony Davis being selected and Tom Benson coming in, that the franchise is probably not in Louisiana anymore. Do not think for a moment that the franchise getting that first pick in 2012 also wasn't somehow manipulated by the league. There is money to be made by the NBA in New Orleans. And this is a business. It's all about money. So in that Chris Paul trade, orchestrated by new GM Dell Demps with the league pulling the strings above him, you got a 3-point shooter that doesn't play defense and didn't want to be in New Orleans in Eric Gordon, a utility player in Al-Farouq Aminu, who has since grown into a quality NBA player. I actually enjoyed watching him play when he was with the Hornets, and I still enjoyed watching him play after he left. And center Chris Kaman. From day one, it never felt like any of those pieces were going to be anything the franchise could build upon for the future. But boy, did Dell Demps really try. He subsequently gave Eric Gordon a 4-year, $60 million contract before the 2012-2013 season that would never, ever produce the type of fruit that tree was expected to in planting. He tried again. He tried to build a team that would sustain success and win in the playoffs, and he had it. He had it in 2017, and that's about it. Trading for DeMarcus Cousins and Nikola Mirotic helped put the Pelicans back in the playoffs and a first-round sweep of the Trailblazers in 2018. Then comes the Anthony Davis demand to be traded. Dell Demps is fired, yada, yada, yada. So let me tell you one of the biggest decisions that the organization got right going forward from that time. Firing Dell Demps before trading Anthony Davis. I, for one, was all about the Dell Demps hire. He came from San Antonio, an organization that had a lot of success while he was there. I think he did a good enough job. He did well enough in his job to produce some results and put teams together around Anthony Davis that had potential. And every team has potential. But we saw that potential transition into results in 2017 with the first round sweep of the Trailblazers and subsequently losing to the Warriors in the second round. Some injuries bit them. Anthony Davis being impatient bit them. But I think firing Dell Demps before trading Anthony Davis was the right move. And I think it started a domino effect of positive moves after that. And it could have been the opposite. It could have been a domino effect of negative moves had they not made the right decision. They could not allow Dell Demps to orchestrate the trade of Anthony Davis when he was on his way out. It was a cloudy time for his employment. It was not 100% sure, 100% known that he would not be staying with the franchise. It was even rumored that he was thinking about leaving. But his transactions and his moves have built one solid playoff and failed to lure Davis into staying in New Orleans. It was time for him to go. And it needed to be done before Davis was traded. So now they've officially been the Pelicans now since the beginning of the 2014-2015 season and have two playoff berths, being swept in the first round of the playoffs by the Warriors in 2014 and then sweeping the Trailblazers and losing to the Warriors 4-1 in 2017-2018. 5 seasons of a new regime, and Demps in the organization failed to get the job done with Davis as the face of the franchise. So, it's time for change, right? Since then, David Griffin, formerly with the Cavaliers, comes in as a vice president of basketball operations, and to me, so far, it's been a great hire. It's hard to judge the job he's done because it's so soon, and it's going to be a few years before we can look back and review some of the moves he's made, but he is now the man pulling the string. I like the roster that they've put together, bringing in a seasoned veteran like J.J. Redick, bringing in Nicole Melli from Italy, the rookies that they've picked up, the trades that they've made with some of the draft picks that they got in the Anthony Davis trade, all above the return on the Anthony Davis trade in general. I like the moves that were made. For that Davis trade, you get multiple first-round picks, Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball, and Brandon Ingram. The picks turn into rookies with a bright future in Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And then above all, the easy decision to select Zion Williamson with this year's first overall pick. This team has a bright future. So, that all being said, let's take a look at this year and why I believe the team is in a good position, like I started this off by saying, despite their unfavorable record. I don't know if I have ever seen a team benefit from the absence of their star player, more than the Pelicans have this year. And don't get me wrong when I say that. I think Zion beginning the season playing and the benefits of him being in the lineup and meshing with the team and building chemistry, getting some of that quality experience would have been great. Great for him, great for the team. But I think his absence allowed some other players to emerge as some productive members of this new look roster. So let's take a look at some of the players that I think have had good seasons, some of the acquisitions that I've just talked about. And I think the first player and the one player to benefit the most from it, and when I say it, I mean Zion's absence, it's got to be Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram, to me, has benefited the most in different ways. Now, he currently sits 10th in the NBA in terms of scoring. He's improved his free throw percentage by 20 points this season. But scoring aside, he's improved as a playmaker. And that's the biggest change in him. Looking back on his days with the Lakers to this season with the Pelicans, his playmaking skills and playmaking ability has vastly improved. His willingness to find the open man out of a double team is one of the biggest developments in those playmaking skills. He has become and morphed into an all-star caliber player right before our eyes. It was no guarantee he took those steps as Zion was healthy. And Zion take away some of those quality minutes. On defense, it's been a bit of a different story. He's been a miscast as a power forward for much of the season because of Zion's absence. So there has been some lag there. And I just think he simply isn't strong enough to take on some of the bigger bodies down low on a consistent basis. So hopefully, now that Zion has returned and he gets a more consistent move back to his natural small forward position, it'll allow him to be a better defender for the team. So let's move on to some other players. Jrue Holiday. In true Jrue Holiday fashion, he had a usual slow start to the season, but then turned it around twofold. He is still an elite on-ball defender. With Zion on the bench, Jrue picked up the scoring as well, being the number 2 scorer on the team. And of course, his defense and leadership are invaluable to these young. Let's talk about somebody who's been controversial, both as a basketball player because of his play and where he was picked, and in the public because of his father, and that's Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball's season thus far has been a roller coaster. There were huge expectations when he came over in the Anthony Davis trade. Some even thought of Ball as the pivotal piece in that trade. I did not. The early returns on that were horrible. His scoring was non-existent. The rebounds and assist numbers weren't there. But the one silver lining that did come with him was his new look jumper, his improved jump shot, okay, and its effectiveness. But at one point, he missed 6 games with an ankle injury, and the Pelicans went 4-2 during that stretch. That was the writing on the wall for him. The writing on the wall, because even when he came back, over the next 12 games, the Pelicans went 1-11. Then out of nowhere, the guy flipped a switch. He becomes this aggressive risk taker, and he's just like this entirely different player. Through the month of January, he's averaging 14.6 points per game, 7.3 rebounds per game, and 8 assists per game. It's going to be interesting to see how he finishes the season and what kind of off. Now let's talk about one of my favorites. JJ Redick is an absolute. He is deadly efficient at everything that he does on offense. But here's the great thing about Redick. He knows what he can do, and he knows what he can't. And he does a really good job of sticking to those strengths. He has carried the team for stretches through droughts this season. JJ currently sits at number 2 in the NBA for 3-point shooting percentage and has taken more than twice the amount of threes than the only player ahead of George Hill. The problem with JJ, though, has and always will be his defense. He tries very hard. It's not an effort thing. He is just not the athlete that some of the guys he's going up against in the NBA are. And he gets out-strengthened by most matchups. But it's not an effort thing, and it's not a talent thing. He's just not that great of an athlete when it comes to comparing him to other NBA talent. Another piece that came over in the Lakers trade, Josh Hart. Let me just say this by starting off with Josh Hart is, for the love of God, get back on defense. I feel like 3 or 4 times a game, this guy is arguing with referees about calls that he didn't get or calls that they did call. And in New Orleans, believe me, everyone in New Orleans knows about crappy referees. the man has good work ethic. He works hard, and he plays like he's 6'10". He sticks to his role for the most part, plays to his strengths, kind of like JJ Redick. But you kind of wish that his shooting percentages were a little higher, and at the same time, he's still a respectable threat. He's an excellent player to have off the bench, and it's good to have him in that capacity because he understands. He hustles when needed. He's zoned in when needed. If he would just get back on defense, because when he does, he's a pest. He really is. He's a good defensive player. So I think there's a little bit left to be sought out with Josh Hart, but so far, pretty good. Let's talk about the rookie Jackson Hayes. What a beast. I mean, in my opinion, so far this year, he's a steal of the draft. This kid wasn't even supposed to play hardly any minutes this year, but currently he's sixth on the team in minutes played. Again, some of that has to do with the absence of Zion Williamson, but still, he leads all rookies in offensive rebounding and blocks, and he's already showing promise as a big man in transition. I mean, he needs to gain a little bit of weight. That would be my one thing. If he can add 20 pounds of muscle over the next couple years, look out NBA. Jackson Hayes will be a problem. Right now, his lack of weight and his lack of strength, it's apparent when he's battling down low for position. He tries to go back up after a miss deep in the paint and consistently gives up ground, consistently gives up post, and it's all got to do with his strength and his weight. His rebound numbers are a little lower because of that. You know, he doesn't have the size. He lacks the size to get consistent rebounds underneath the basket. He's very talented, though. Very talented. Especially setting screens, he is very talented. Right now, he's 12th in the NBA in screen assists per 36 minutes played. So, at the midway point, it's been a pleasant surprise to watch a rookie play as well as Jackson Hayes is playing. The last one I want to discuss is the Italian, Nicolai Melli. I expected some earlier returns from Nicolai Melli. You're talking about a former EuroLeague MVP. He himself, too, is not particularly athletic in regards to NBA standards. But it's just taking him some time to adjust to the speed of the NBA. However, he is extremely skilled. He does have a lot of skill. He's a good basketball player. He's a good shooter from the three-point line. He's picked up his three-point shooting as of late. He currently has a three-point shot at 44.4% through the month of January. I think his biggest flaw is on defense. I think he's a weakness on that side of the ball. He allows his opponents to shoot right now more than 8% better than their receiving average. And that is just downright terrible. So the returns on Melli so far, not so great. He's been a weakness on the defensive side of the ball, but I think he can get better. And I think he has a bright future in a Pelicans farm. So overall, if we're talking about the team so far halfway through the season, some positives. I think the most significant positive for the team statistically has been its three-point shooting. They rank 4th in the league for attempts. In addition, they rank 6th for three-point percentage at 37%. And because of that, they have basically lived and died by the three-point arc. It's funny to look at it, too, because rebounding has been a struggle for the team. But they are currently ranked 12th in the NBA in offensive rebounding. They've also had by far the toughest schedule in the league. So that goes a little bit in their favor in regards to it's been pretty tough. To that end, though, the fact that they're still alive in the playoff hunt, it should be, recognized for sure because they're not far behind the AC. Some negatives, they do stand out. Look, they rank in the bottom 10 of the league in turnovers, steals, defensive rebounding, free throw attempts, and free throw percentage. That last one there is the one that gives me the most heartburn. Free throw percentage. The Pelicans rank 28th. 16 of their losses, 16, have come close enough for the number of missed free throws to swing the game if they had been converted. And I get it. They're not going to shoot 100% from the stripe every night. But if you convert half of those 16 games, the team is currently at 500 at 33-33 and is in a much better position. So, let's talk about the one person everybody wants to talk about. Okay? And that's Zion Williamson. Boy, is this kid big, he's physical, and he is explosive. He's especially explosive and strong inside, near the basket. Over 80% of his attempts come within 4 feet of the rim, and he's making about 68% of those. Almost 70%. This prolific finishing hints at the late room for him to grow. I mean, 85% of Zion's shot attempts occur when he is tightly or very tightly guarded. That size, okay, his big physical size, has also helped him with rebounding, but especially offensive rebounding. 81% of Zion's shots either go in the basket or are then rebounded by Zion himself. To me, so far his passing is what sets him apart. He's shown the same playmaking and the same court vision and intuition that he often should have do. Within minutes of the tip-off in his first game, a post-entry pass to Zion forced the Spurs to quickly on the fly switch up defenders. This allowed Brandon Ingram to cut straight through a gap. And of course, Zion, in real time, processing all of this with his master's court vision, in lieu of a jump shot, hit Ingram in stride for an easy basket. What I'm getting at is that Zion's passing and his court vision can clear up some space on the court and make defenders be more hesitant to smother him, which will in turn leave an open teammates. Okay, I think he's played well. I think he's grown in the short time that he's been back. I think he does, while he's big and physical, I think he does need to turn some of his body fat into muscle. But this whole notion that he's way overweight and he's out of condition, I think that's bull. Because we've seen him in the few short weeks that he's been back. We've seen him get more acclimated to the speed of the NBA game and the flow of an NBA game. So I'm very excited to see what he can do with the rest of the season and going forward in Pelicans. All right, let's talk some football. Let's get into this new proposed CBA between the NFL Players Association and the NFL itself. So the current CBA expires within the next 2 years. It's a 10-year deal, and the owners have put forth a proposed CBA with some pretty major changes for the NFLPA to vote on. And if it were to be, and most likely will be, I'm not saying there are not going to be any changes to the proposal, but there most likely will be a new CBA signed by both the NFLPA and the NFL, which is basically just the NFL owners, before the start of the 2021 season. So some of those changes. The biggest one so far, 17-game regular season. Okay. Currently we have 17 weeks in the regular season, but the teams only play 16 games. You'd be adding a week and adding a game that the teams will play. Some of the talks around this is whether or not they're going to add a bye week. And it does not seem that this proposal has that in there, but I do think that that's a good idea. But that's a conversation for a different time. In addition to the 17-game regular season, you get more roster spots, more active roster spots. They're going to shorten the preseason by 1 game. So instead of 4 games, it'll be 3. There's a higher percentage of revenue share for the players, and then upgraded pensions for former players. So the most important one here, especially for the players, is the higher percentage of revenue. And I think that's going to be the one big catalyst here that's going to keep it from being signed right off the bat. But let's talk about some of the more interesting ones in regards to fans, in regards to the owners for sure because of the money side of it. Expanding the regular season to 17 games and shortening the preseason to 3 games. The NFL would then alter its playoff structure for the first time since 2002. Because in 2002, there was a realignment of divisions and playoff structure. So the new playoffs would be both conferences would have 7 playoff teams instead of 6, which would then create a revised schedule featuring 6 games on wildcard weekend. As part of that proposal, only one team from each conference will receive a first round bye, as opposed to the current rules when 2 teams receive that first round bye. So I went back and looked to see how this would have affected some of the teams in the past. And I went back 10 years. So in the last 10 years, had the new proposed rules been in place in regards to the schedule and playoffs, you would have added 5 10-win teams, 9 9-win teams, and 6 8-win teams. 6 500 record teams. By far, the team helped the most would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. It would have added 4 more playoff trips, and they would have made the playoffs 10 out of the last 10 years. In 2010, you had a 9-7 San Diego team that would have made it, and a 10-6 New York Giants team that would have made it. In 2011, you had a 9-7 Tennessee team that would have made it, and a 500 team in the 8-8 Chicago Bears that would have made it. 2012, again, the 8-8 Pittsburgh Steelers, the 10-6 Chicago Bears. 2013, again, the 8-8 Pittsburgh Steelers and the 10-6 Arizona Cardinals. That's 2 8-8 seasons back to back in 2012 and 2013 that the Pittsburgh Steelers would have made it. 2014, 9-7 Houston Texans, 10-7 Philadelphia Eagles. 2015, the 10-6 New York Jets, and the 500 8-8 Atlanta Falcons. 2016, the 9-7 Tennessee Titans and the 9-7 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2017, the 9-7 Baltimore Ravens and the 9-7 Detroit Lions. A playoff appearance for the Detroit Lions would have been nice. For Detroit fans, anyway. 2018, you would have had 2 teams with ties. The 9-6-1 Pittsburgh Steelers and the 8-7-1 Minnesota Vikings. 2 teams with ties would have been in the playoffs. And then last year, in 2019, the 8-8 Pittsburgh Steelers, again, 500 Pittsburgh Steelers would have made the playoffs, and the 9-7 Los Angeles Rams would have made the playoffs. The biggest issue here so far, right now, my opinion, is the revenue share. Like I said earlier, the revenue share increase isn't in the players' favor with the increased revenue that the owners in the league would make from these changes. And I'm very much expecting the players to voice their concerns over it and basically deny this first proposal. So the first major step in the new NFL year is the combine, the NFL combine. And that's this week, ladies and gentlemen. That is this week. Indianapolis, Indiana, Lucas Oil Stadium, NFL combine. 16 LSU players will attend, with most of the media surrounding Joe Burrow. However, he will basically not participate. And rightfully so. He will not work out, and he will not throw. And it's a business decision, and it's a smart one. It's a smart one. So he's basically going to show face, meet with teams, talk to teams. But the anticipation and the expectation is that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to draft Joe Burrow number 1 overall. So why would he throw and why would he work out and maybe, possibly, jeopardize that place he currently holds? One thing that did happen this week that people have made light of, I've made light of, I do, and I'll get into it in a second, I do not think it's that big of a deal. But one thing that did happen this week that could somewhat jeopardize that is that Joe Burrow was measured and recorded to having the smallest hands-on record for a quarterback since 2008 combine. His hands measured at an even 9 inches. I don't think it's that big. Obviously, I'm not some quarterback guru. Obviously, I'm not some NFL genius, but I just don't see that being that big of a deal. Yes, I get it. Gripping the ball harder with bigger hands will make someone more efficient, especially if they're in inclement weather. But I don't think that's going to hinder him so much to where he's not going to be a great quarterback. or a good quarterback. I mean, you've got 3 quarterbacks that have been taken in the draft recently that have smaller hands. Jared Goff being one at 9 inches, Patrick Mahomes at 9 1/4, Deshaun Watson at 9 3/4. It's not that big of a deal. You got 2 Raging Cajun players going to the combine this week, and running back Raymond Calais and offensive lineman Robert Hunt. It should be interesting. Should be interesting to watch. You can catch it on TV if you have NFL Network. It is interesting. It is fun to watch if you have, if you have some players that you followed in college to see how they do at the combine, to see if any records are broken, any 40-yard dash records, anything like that. Watch how the tight ends catch, how the wide receivers catch, especially if your team, if you follow the Saints, some of their needs being wide receiver, offensive linemen, linebackers, that type of thing. Now I want to get into our newest segment called Interesting Question. Interesting Question is brought to you by Maintenance King. Maintenance King is the premier provider of maintenance services like lawn maintenance, debris cleanup, pressure washing services, and on-site mobile detailing in the Acadiana area. With prices that are hard to beat and high-quality services in addition, Maintenance King can help keep your assets like your home, business, or car in top shape. Call Maintenance King today to get your free quote at 337-224-8421 or on Facebook, search Maintenance King or at maintenanceking.org. Again, that phone number is 337-224-8421. So this newest segment, Interesting Question, is basically just that. It's listeners submitting questions. You can, if you want, submit questions to the email. It's American Sports Podcast 2020 at gmail.com. That's American Sports Podcast 2020 at gmail.com, or by submitting your question in the form of a comment on the YouTube feed. And we will take those questions and answer them the following week episode. This past week, we got 2 questions. The first being submitted by a good friend of mine, Kerry Caspone. His question was, do you think by extending the season, the NFL season, that since most players don't play in the preseason, can it be dangerous for players' health? Well, that's an interesting question. So do I think that by extending the season, if it can be dangerous for players' health? Look, I don't think the decrease in preseason games will have as much of an impact as adding a game does. Adding a regular season game. There are no health benefits to adding game. It's all about money. The players get an extra game check. The players get extra bonuses with the extra playoff game. And the extra game adds to the revenue the owners and the league makes. The league has seen a drastic shift into player safety, with advances both in protocols like the concussion protocol and advances in technology, both in studies, the production of equipment. But the bottom line is an extra game is extra risk. So therefore, to answer your question, yes, it will be more dangerous, especially if they stick with a 1 bye week schedule. The second question is submitted by listener Yogi Walters. He asks, could you see the Saints picking Justin Jefferson, and would he be a good fit? Well, that's an interesting question. The Saints pick at 24 in the 2020 draft in the first round. I think Justin Jefferson, this is just my opinion, I do not foresee him going in the first round. So, watching Justin Jefferson last year, he had a phenomenal year. I think he's got some good burst off the snap. I think he is slippery when he's working in traffic. I think he redirects well in space. I think his jab step gives him some initial separation. And I think that he is a natural pass catcher. I think he's got good hands and he knows how to naturally go and get the ball. However, on the other side of that, I think that the spread scheme threw the field too open for him, if that makes sense. I think he also needs some more attention to detail with his route running. I think that needs some work. I was unable to see him run away and separate from some tight coverage at times. And I think some of that is his size and his strength, because I think his size and his strength impedes him from a good player opposite of him. So an example of that would be bump and run, right? So bump and run coverage, I think his size and his strength and his inability to run away from tight coverage can hurt him in the NFL. That being said, I do think he would be a good player for the Saints opposite of Michael Thomas. I think he's going to be a good player for any NFL team that he goes to. But I don't think he's a first round wide receiver. Does that mean he's not going to go in the first round? No. I just would not pick him in the first round. I think he's a second round pick. And the Saints don't have a second round pick this year. They sent that away to move up last year and get center Nick Boy, which has proven to be a very smart one. So I think there's a very slim chance Justin Jefferson is with the Saints. But I do hope he goes in the first round. I hope he has a very good NFL career because I do like watching him play. So Cajuns baseball is now 2-6 on the season, getting their first victory of 2020 against Southeastern last Tuesday, a 9-6 victory, before turning around and then losing with that same score to Tulane the very next day on Wednesday evening. The 3-game tilt versus a struggling Virginia Tech team at the Teague this past weekend saw the Cajuns pick up 1 victory on Friday and 2 losses on Saturday and Sunday. Cajun softball participated in a UAB Blazer Classic over the weekend, posting a 4-1 record in the tournament with a loss on Friday evening to the number 8 ranked Oklahoma State, but responding to that with 4 straight victories, 2 of which over Ole Miss, 1 over Oklahoma State, and 1 over UAB. On Tuesday, the Cajuns split a doubleheader with the number 3 ranked Texas Longhorns, and the Cajuns will then travel to Gainesville this coming weekend for an important 3-game series against the number 6 ranked Florida Gators. Tigers baseball, Palmareras Tigers sit at 5-3 on the season after taking 2 of 3 both the Saturday and Sunday games from Eastern Kentucky this past weekend at Alex Box Stadium. Pitching is still the greatest asset the Tigers have 8 games into the 2020 season. And the Tiger softball program is 13-1 this season, their only loss coming at the hands of the Raging Cajuns in Lafayette back on February 15th. The Tigers took part in their home Purple and Gold Challenge tournament this past weekend in Baton Rouge, with 2 wins over each Sam Houston State and Belmont, 3 of those games ending in a 5-inning run rule. Shelby Wickersham recorded her second career no-hitter in an 8-0 victory Friday night over Sam Houston State. The victory also gave head coach Beth Torina her 500th NCAA victory. The Tigers will travel this weekend to participate in the Judy Garman Classic with 5 other teams, including number 25 ranked Texas Tech and number 2 ranked Washington.